I'm resisting the urge to ask you cheeky questions.
You can ask cheeky questions, that's all right. I'm used to it.
Do you think there is other life out there?
I think there is life out there in the universe. That's mostly based on the fact that we are now discovering that there are many, many solar systems out there, many, many places that we think are at least similar to the Earth. Also the fact that when we look back into the fossil record here on Earth, we find that life formed not too long after the Earth itself formed, within the first, say, few hundred million years or billion years after the beginning of the Earth itself. So what we found is that if life can form when the conditions are right, and it seems that the conditions are very common out there, then if I were putting money on it, I would say there's probably life out there.
Welcome to the Bountifull Podcast, where we explore what it means to live a bountiful life. Today we have the honour of welcoming Joshua Pepper, a Professor of Physics at Lehigh University and a Program Scientist for NASA, to the show. Joshua has dedicated his career to expanding our understanding of the universe. As an astrophysicist and astronomer, Joshua's work has been pivotal in uncovering the mysteries of the cosmos, particularly through the discovery of exoplanets and the development of innovative telescope technologies. Currently, he serves as a lead program officer for the Astrophysics Data Analysis Program and is the program scientist for the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite Mission. I'm surprised I did that without a tongue-tied. In this episode, we'll dive into Joshua's journey from his early fascination with the sciences to his leading role at NASA. We'll explore themes of science, grit, and the lifelong commitment it takes to contribute to groundbreaking discoveries. There's something deeply bountiful about the universe itself, and today we ponder humanity's place within it, the risks and uncertainties of pursuing a career in science, and how maintaining a growth mindset has helped Joshua achieve long-term success. Finally, we discuss the evolution of exoplanetary science and its broader implications for understanding the universe and our place in it. Joshua, welcome to the Bountifull Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
What an incredible life you've had.
I think so, but everyone's had pretty incredible lives.
So obviously we are here at Lehigh University. As someone that is from New Zealand and has never attended American university, I'm like, classes in session, this is so cool.
This is the room where I teach many, many, many classes in physics and astronomy.
I love it. Well, thank you for being here today. Do you want to share a little bit about your upbringing and your background?
Sure. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, born and raised, and I went to school in New Jersey at Princeton University. And then I came back to Ohio after a brief detour working in business in New York City for a year, since I wanted to see what it was like to work in business before I dove back into academia. So I went to graduate school at Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio. Then I became a postdoc at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And then I came to Lehigh University in 2013 as a professor. So I joined the department here as an astronomer, and I've been teaching and advising students and doing research. And that entire time, I've been building up a whole series of scientific projects, mostly centered around the science of exoplanets. And a couple years ago, I took a leave from Lehigh to go work as a program scientist at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. So that's where I am helping to enable science being done by thousands and tens of thousands of scientists all over the country and all over the world to pursue astronomy and our knowledge about space.
Before we get into the Bountifull Podcast stuff, you've got to tell me, what is an exoplanet and why should people care about them?
Sure. So an exoplanet is a planet that is outside of our solar system. So growing up, you might have seen pictures of our solar system. We have the sun that we are orbiting on the Earth, and then there's the other planets in our solar system: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And there's other things in our solar system. But outside of our solar system is the whole rest of the Milky Way galaxy with billions of stars. And each of those stars, it turns out, are very likely to host planets of their own. So not just our solar system, but millions and even billions of other solar systems. And until the last 30 years or so, we weren't really sure if planets existed around those stars. Now we have verified that most, if not all, of those stars have planets, and now we're working to understand what those planets are like. And as far as why people should care, It really depends on what you think is interesting about the universe and interesting to know about the universe. If you don't really care about knowing about things outside of Earth, and you're not really care about what might happen in next succeeding generations, then frankly it doesn't matter. Then you can live your life and you can be perfectly happy and fine and have a fulfilling life of just not paying attention to the cosmos around us. But if you do find that exciting and interesting, then this is a huge development, because it means that we know that there are places like our own solar system, we hope, around other stars, and we want to understand what they're like.
So our dreams of our Star Wars dreams are maybe going to come to life, minus the lightsabers. So the theory is we might be able to live on some other planets that exist in other galaxies.
Well, I'll put it this way. I wouldn't make any plans. I wouldn't pack your bags. We are not going to any of these planets anytime within our lifetime or the lifetimes of our children or grandchildren, just because it takes so long and it's so hard to travel between stars. But it doesn't mean that we can't enrich our own lives and understanding of the cosmos by learning about those places, even if we can't go there ourselves.
Yeah, love that. So we're here on the Bountiful Podcast. What does it mean to you to live a bountiful life?
I think the most important thing for a bountiful life for me is to have an impact in whatever is meaningful to me and to the people that I love during my life. It means contributing to the sum of human knowledge and discovery. It means having a career or a job that I can get up every morning and feel excited and motivated to go in and to help achieve whatever it is that our goals are to achieve, and to do that in in a community that I feel part of, and with a family that I love and adore.
Nice, love that. Do you have a worldview, or how do you see the world?
I am a very traditional scientific worldview. My view is very, materialistic. I am neither religious nor spiritual. I do not believe in God. I have a deep love of the culture and religious tradition I was born and raised in, but my worldview is very much constructed and reinforced by the way that I see the world and that I deal with the world all the time, in which we are using our knowledge and our ability to perceive the world to then understand it in whatever way possible, to understand the aspects that we don't yet know about, and to try to learn more and more. I guess that's the core of my worldview.
But we'll get into chance and randomness later, because you have views on that. How do you see yourself?
I see myself as someone who is trying very, very hard to live a meaningful and beneficial life in an imperfect world, in a system that is designed by people who are, of course, imperfect, and there's a lot of pain and death and suffering in the world, and I'm trying to do what I can in the way that I can see most beneficial to help build up a little bit of human understanding in my role.
Love that. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
So when I was 25, I was just about nearing the end of graduate school. It was a very difficult time for myself. So this was during the time when I was getting my PhD. I was in Columbus, Ohio. I was in the process of grinding through 6 years of graduate school, and it was a very difficult time. I suffered from anxiety, from depression, and I think the advice I would give is to realize that the work that I was doing there was going to pay off in extraordinary ways that I couldn't even imagine at the time, and that it was something that I would look back on with gratitude that I was able to make it through successfully due to the support of all wonderful people all around me, and that things were going to be opening up in really amazing ways in the future.
What was it during that time, if I may ask, that was so challenging?
So being a graduate student in physics or astronomy or many areas of sciences or even anywhere else in academia can be a very lonely and isolating experience. The system that we have at least in America, in many other countries in the world, is one where as a student you are working on your own research and scholarship very, very often without a larger community around you. Even though you're part of a department, you're working with an advisor, you may be working with a couple colleagues, but you feel very much the responsibility for taking the scholarship that you're building, whether it's a book or a chapter or research papers or instruments that you're building, and making it successful. And that is a lot of and that's a big burden, because you know that the success of that is going to affect not only your achievement of a degree, but that's also going to have effects on your ability to have a career and your future as a professional in the field. And that's a time when, as a young person, you're not, you're very often only a few years out of college, and you're still trying to figure out your role in the world, and it can be a very unsettling time. And so for me, it was like that. I was unsure about whether I was going to succeed. I was unsure about whether the work I was doing was going to be meaningful or impactful. And at the time, it was only at the beginning of the era. This was back in, 2004 or so. It wasn't as common to be talking about mental health issues and mental health in general in a lot of areas of higher education, and so
or anywhere,
or anywhere, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So that was difficult for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, how did you get into? What did you go to university for, and then how did you get into essentially exoplanets?
Sure.
And then we'll get into a bit of your research and what you found.
So I went to college at Princeton, and I started off as a physics major. I had always loved science and physics from a young age. My father was an engineer, and he, really built a love of science and math for me. So I decided I wanted to become a physicist. When I got to Princeton, I found that there was a huge physics department with many, many students. It was very competitive and very difficult. And there was another department just across the lawn that was the astrophysics department that had many professors, very few students, and enormous opportunities for one-on-one mentorship with the faculty there. So I switched to astrophysics there. And then I decided to go to graduate school in astrophysics. And when I was a young grad student at Ohio State, I was working in my office one day on a research project that had nothing to do with exoplanets, and a professor walked by my office and said, "Hey, are you doing anything?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, I got a project for you." And he had me start working on a theoretical paper about how a possible NASA mission at that time might be able to discover exoplanets. And that theoretical paper turned into a very long and involved paper that said there is an optimal design for a small telescope to discover exoplanets, and that basically became my dissertation, and then it became my career. So it was all just a happenstance of being asked to work on that one project.
Do you want to talk a little bit about happenstance?
Sure. In the example that I just gave you, it is very common, especially in I think in research, to stumble upon opportunities or results or just conversations that can lead to new avenues opening up, new research areas, new collaborations, people to work with, and I think that in general, and especially in America, we underrate how significant randomness and chance is in life in general. There's so much sense of individualism and that we are the masters of our destiny, and that we really look to the individual person as as having full responsibility for every circumstance and eventuality in their life. And I think it's bonkers. I think it's ridiculous, because there is so much randomness that happens in life in terms of where we are born, the family we're born into, the wealth and resources that we have to do the things that we want to do, to pursue education and jobs and happiness, to have the health, good health to be able to do those things, and it doesn't mean that we don't have a degree of control over our destiny, but it is not complete by any chance. And I think there's too little understanding of just how much all of our lives are affected by the randomness of every interaction that we have on a daily basis.
Does that sort of mean And I'm not a scientist or a mathematician, so Bountiful followers can forgive me for this lay question. But does that sort of mean that there is a random assigned probability to all of our lives and that there's an effect on every interaction or everything we kind of do enhances or does something?
I think there
You know what I'm saying?
I think I see what you're saying. So I wouldn't call it a randomly assigned probability, but there is just inherent randomness in, whether you're planning to go meet someone and whether the traffic is good or bad and whether you get there early or late, and that will affect, the tenor of the conversation you have or, your ability to get things done in time. And it doesn't mean that randomness is baked in or intrinsic to that particular interaction. It's just a feature of life in general. And I think it means that we need to be a bit more generous with ourselves and with each other in recognizing that there's randomness all around, and we need to be able to be willing to forgive the universe for having that degree of randomness. And we roll with it. We do everything we can to accommodate and then deal with it and understand how to work with it in our lives.
Seeing title. Roll with the universe.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit more about NASA and how you became a program scientist.
Sure. So so I've been at Lehigh since 2013. I got tenured in 2019, which was a huge milestone in the life of any professor or academic.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And after that, I started finding myself in a little bit of of sort of an emptiness of not really being sure where I wanted to go. A major project that I was working on for many, many years was wrapping up. This was the project of building small telescopes that was first engendered by that theory paper that I mentioned before. So that was closing out. My work on the NASA TESS space mission was evolving, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then COVID hit. While I was on sabbatical, while I was spending time with a colleague of mine at the University of California, Riverside, working with him and his amazing students, and I really wasn't sure where I wanted to go career-wise. And then I saw I can't remember if it was an advertisement or an actual talk at one of the astronomy conferences about the opportunity to work at NASA headquarters. So NASA is a huge organization. They have these centers all around the country. These centers have thousands or tens of thousands of scientists and engineers and mathematicians and staff of all types who work on the missions that bring us all these amazing results about the universe. But those are the scientists doing the science, but there's also NASA headquarters, which is a relatively small collection of people in Washington, D.C., who oversee the whole operation, who basically work with the bureaucracy of the federal government to enable all of the scientists at all of these places to get their work done. And over time as a professor, I was realizing that I had a degree of capability in what you might call management, just simply administration and keeping track of things, overseeing large, complex activities, which is something that some brilliant scientists have and some brilliant scientists don't have it. And when I realized that about myself, I wanted to find a way to make that skill work for everyone else. And so I applied for the position as program scientist, and I got it in 2022. And I've been incredibly happy doing it because I am not doing science myself in that role. What I'm doing is I'm helping to smooth the road for all of the scientists all over the country and all over the world to enable them to do their science so that they don't have to deal with all the paperwork and bureaucracy and everything that a huge organization like a federal agency has. And I feel very fulfilled doing that.
Yeah. And I guess you also had all of your own sort of sciencey experiences.
I've been working in science for 20 years. Yeah. I've built telescopes, I've written papers, I've made discoveries, I've mentored students, I've taught classes. I've done all of the things that scientists do in their lives, and for some people, that just leads to more excitement and drive and ambition to do more of that and discover the next discovery around the next bend. For me, I was looking for something different. I was looking for a bit of a change.
Do you want to tell me about your telescopes and how you built your first telescope that then led to the discovery of the exoplanets and whatnot.
Sure. So I mentioned that theoretical paper. So I worked on that for, 9 months, a year with that professor. And at the end of it, we realized that the result of that paper gave us a few simple equations that said, oh, here's the optimal way to build a small telescope to discover exoplanets. Now, mind you, this was back in 2002 or so, when there were only a few dozen exoplanets known. Total, and we didn't know much about them, and the method that we were using to discover planets in the paper that I was writing had only discovered, I think, 1 or 2 planets at that time. This is the so-called transit method, where you look for a planet that happens to be in an orbit aligned with our line of sight, passing in front of the star. So when it passes in front of the star, it causes our view of the starlight to dim just a little bit. And by seeing that dimming of the star, you can infer that there's a planet there. So the telescope that we designed was called the Kilodegree Extremely Little Telescope, or KELT. And that's a play on the fact that astronomers very often call their telescopes these superlative names: the 30-meter telescope, the extremely large telescope, the overwhelmingly large telescope is a funny one. So we called ours the extremely little telescope because the width of the aperture of the telescope, the barrel of the camera, was only about a couple inches wide. And we could do that, just like a telephoto lens that had never. In fact, the camera that we had was a very high-end scientific camera, but the camera barrel is just a telephoto lens that people use for just hobby photography. And we were able to do that because we were trying to discover planets orbiting very nearby bright stars. So we didn't need a huge camera or a huge telescope. We only needed a small one that measured the light very precisely. So we put it together. I built it in a side office in the Department of Astronomy at Ohio State. We installed it at a observatory down in Arizona called Weiner Observatory, and it's a robotic telescope. So every night the telescope roof would roll, the observatory roof would roll off, and the telescope would wake up, and it would start taking pictures of the sky night after night, week after week, year after year. And it built up a record of the brightness of millions of stars. And then we searched those brightnesses of those stars to see if we could see those little dips of brightness. And it took a long time. We built the telescope around 2005, 2006. It took data up through 2011, and it wasn't until, I think, 2012 that we had our first real confirmation of our first planet discovery. It was a long and exhausting process. I worked with a lot of people to try to fix it, people who built pipelines, people who helped fund the project, to analyze the data. But because it took so long, we had a lot of data waiting, so we made our first discovery in 2012, 2013, and by the end of the full project, after we built not only the one in Arizona, but a duplicate one in South Africa, we had discovered 26 planets. 26 newly discovered planets. All the planets are named after the telescope, so they've got names like KELT 1b, KELT 2b, things like that, and it's really exciting.
And so, I mean, the question I have is like, what was it, like an 8 to 11 year time span? Like, as a scientist or person working on this project, like, that's a long time for anyone. Like, how do you like stay the course and not get disheartened by not finding anything? Like, did you give up at any point or want to give up at any point?
I absolutely wanted to give up at different points because it just felt like it was taking so long. When we were first building the telescope, we were thinking, oh man, it might take us 3 years before we discover a planet. And of course it took, almost 10. I think the reason we didn't give up is, one, I had a core group of supporters around me. There were professors at Ohio State and at Vanderbilt University who believed in the project. There were other graduate students, there were postdocs who were involved in the project, there were undergrads who worked with us, and everyone who started working with us saw the value of the project, even if they realized it wasn't yielding the fruits of the project right away. And so it was absolutely necessary to have the support of all these people who still believed in it. But the other part was, this was not the only thing that I was working on. It's very common as a scientist to have maybe one primary project, but then you also work in several other groups or projects. And those other activities kept me sane. They kept me from just dwelling entirely on the KELT project and thinking only about that, but focusing on other things, and also seeing other projects yield results faster. And that, seeing at least some things, come to fruition faster was very much helped a lot.
I'm going to kind of zigzag here, but for people watching that maybe aren't scientists and don't necessarily understand the sciences in like this sort of way, what's sort of the impact, or why does this sort of matter to humanity to make these discoveries? I think you've sort of said this already, but I want to like kind of reiterate why you think it matters to us.
I'll tell you first why I think the particular projects that I work on matter, but then also more broadly. So the reason we were looking for these exoplanets is that we were specifically looking for big gas giant planets that are like Jupiter and Saturn that are orbiting really, really close to their stars. These are called hot Jupiters. The reason we were looking for them is that the ones that are orbiting the nearest and brightest stars give us the opportunity for very precise measurements of those planets. It allows us to measure their atmospheres, to see the physics of how the gravity between the planet and the star move, and it's just an opportunity for further understanding and discovery about the nature of these planets. So that was why we were looking for those specific planets. As far as why to care about any of this at all, this is just part of the historical long-term desire of humanity to understand more about the universe, because we want to know what's around the next bend or over the next hill or across that ocean. And for many people, it brings fulfillment and excitement and joy to learn more about the universe. Even if it has no concrete applications whatsoever in our daily lives, there's still something meaningful and exciting about knowing more about what is out there. And if you feel that that's meaningful and worthwhile to yourself, then I think you would see the value in doing this. But there are people who do not see that, and I am not going to argue with them. There are other things in life to be excited and find meaningful, and science and discovery isn't the only one.
Knowledge is power, hey?
It is.
So back to the zag of the zig.
Mm-hmm.
So this project, what is your advice to fellow scientists, PhD students, those sorts of things, on really long-run projects that have potential to have a lot of impact, but just seem to be taking a really long time? Like, how did you, outside of your support network?
I think, you mentioned the support network. That is absolutely essential. I would advise no one to embark on a difficult long-term project without having people around you that you can trust, senior people that can be mentors, peers that can work with you and commiserate with you about how long things are taking. I think that's essential. I would also advise, like I mentioned that I did myself, finding additional things to work on professionally. Of course, we all need additional things in our life: hobbies, families, activities, sports, whatever it is that allows you to put aside your daily professional thoughts and just concentrate on something else. But even within your own profession, to have multiple things going at the same time, because it allows you to set aside something that becomes frustrating and slow and grinding and just work on something a little bit fresh for a little while. I think that's really important.
Speaking of hobbies, like when you were like, no more planets today, did you are you a runner, or a weightlifter, or what do you spend your time on when you're not doing science and teaching and going to conferences and with your family? So
I am when I can, I try to run and lift weights. I got into that in high school, and I've been doing that for years whenever I'm not injured. Which happens to anyone who works out. That's a common thing. And then I love taking. I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is a beautiful old town, and I love just taking walks in the neighborhood and seeing that. I love reading and learning more about the world, and those are the kinds of things that are my sort of breakaway.
I mean, it is beautiful here, very
It
green.
is a beautiful place.
This is really cheeky. Any fiction books in your world or just pure science?
No, fiction too. In fact, I'm a huge fan of, of course, it makes sense, of Andy Weir. He's the author who wrote the books The Martian and Project Hail Mary. I think those are fantastic. They're so exciting and geekily exciting to a geek like myself. But I think many people all over find those exciting. I will say that there is another book that has become very famous lately called The Three-Body Problem, which I think is highly overrated because I keep getting asked about this because they made it into a Netflix special and I think someone else is making it into a movie. I don't think it's very good, but we can cut that out if we need to.
We just glaze over that one.
Yeah.
What would you say have been some of the most profound experiences you've had in your scientific career to date?
I'll tell you a few of them. So one of them is the first time we were looking at the plots of data from the KELT telescope that I was working on, and I saw the first sign of what looked to be a finally convincing signal of an exoplanet candidate in our data. And that was extremely exciting. I can't even remember if that particular one turned out to be real or not. One of the problems and challenges why this project took so long is that there are lots of what we call false positives in the data, things that look like the signal of a planet but actually is not that. But seeing the first one that I was reasonably sure, oh, that's probably a real planet. Another really profound moment came when I got the offer to come to Lehigh as a professor. It is extremely hard to get permanent jobs working as a scientist. There are very few out there. There's a huge amount of randomness, again, in who has the opportunity to get selected to become a professor, and I felt really privileged to get that opportunity. And the first time that one of my PhD students graduated, we have a ceremony. I don't know if it's outside the United States or Western Europe where we do called a hooding ceremony, where there's a piece of cloth called a hood where the advisor puts it on top of the student when they get their PhD. And when I was able to do that for my first PhD student, I felt really just overwhelmed.
Love that. On that, becoming a professor, and it might be random, but do you seem like very positive and sort of like quite, I don't know if outgoing is the right word, but like learning is so important, but the people you're learning off can be more important, especially when you're teaching complicated subjects. Like if you sort of like enhance a student's desire to learn, do you think that maybe part of the reason why you got your job is because you make people excited about science?
I hope that's a little bit of it. Obviously one of the core jobs we have as professors is to teach. And I hope that, when I came, when you get interviewed to become a professor, that you do a demonstration of teaching, you talk about your own research, but you also, often will demonstrate your ability to teach in a class. And I like to think that my students get a little bit more jazzed or excited about, learning about physics or astronomy from hearing from a professor who themselves is a little bit excited about it. I think that's, bringing a level of energy into the classroom is so important because I, and I'm sure everyone has sat through very, very boring classes, being taught by people who did not have a lot of energy, who were just slowly and monotonically going through, equations or whatever, and that's just not great. It's just not a great way to learn, and so I think if you can bring a little bit of excitement and energy, it helps the students. Yeah.
So I was cheeky and asked you to put some equations on the board. What have we got up here?
Oh, these are a few very basic equations that have to do with exoplanets. So this little trapezoid shape here is the sign of a transit. That is the brightness of a star when a planet goes in front of it. That's Kepler's third law up there that relates how long it takes a planet to orbit a star to how far the planet is from the star and the mass of the star. These are the names of some of the NASA missions that we've got going on right now or that are coming up. So the last of these, HWO, is the Habitable Worlds Observatory. That's the one I'm so excited about because that is it's a NASA mission. I am the Deputy Program Scientist for HWO. It is the next flagship mission that NASA is planning to build and launch after we do the Roman Space Telescope, which is going to launch in a couple years. And the Habitable Worlds Observatory is going to be a space telescope that will sit out far away out in the region where the James Webb Space Telescope is, and it'll directly look at nearby stars, block the light of the star, and see the light of planets orbiting that star. And why that's so amazing is because that will have the ability to see that light from the planets of Earth-sized planets at the right distances from their stars where there could be liquid water on their surface, and we're going to look for signs of life on those planets. It's the first telescope that NASA is building specifically to find life on exoplanets, and we are super excited about it. And speaking of long projects, the projected time for this is going to be around 2040 to 2045 when it launches. So this is a generational project.
And then what happens if we find signs of life?
Then it's an entirely new continent of possibilities. Then we start examining all the different signs of life. We start looking to see what kind of life is it? Is it like our own life? Are the signs of life on different planets around different stars more similar to each other than maybe to our own life here on Earth? How common is the life that we have compared to the life out there? Is it made out of the same, chemical constituents? Is it happening on the same types of planets? There's innumerable questions you can start asking about that life. So it's discovering a sign of life is just the very beginning of a huge journey.
I'm resisting the urge to ask you cheeky questions.
You can ask cheeky questions, that's all right. I'm used to it.
Do you think there is other life out there in the universe?
My belief, it's just a belief, it's not there's no proof of it, is that I think there is life out there in the universe. That's mostly based on the fact that we are now discovering that there are many, many solar systems out there, many, many places that we think are at least similar to the Earth. Also the fact that when we look back into the fossil record here on Earth, we find that life formed not too long after the Earth itself formed, within the first, say, few hundred million years or billion years after the beginning of the Earth itself. And that implies, it doesn't necessarily mean, but it implies that life can form readily when the conditions are right. Mm-hmm. So what we found is that if life can form when the conditions are right, and it seems that the conditions are very common out there, then if I were putting money on it, I would say there's probably life out there.
Love that. I wonder if they'll make me take that out.
I don't think so. I think that's a cool thing that we often, I say that publicly from NASA.
How do you find meaning in the vastness of the universe, that seemingly endless possibilities that it holds?
I kind of feel like that answers the question itself. The seemingly endless possibilities of the universe itself represents a degree of meaning. Now, I'm a very much a humanist in the sense that I attribute the meaning that we find in the universe is coming from us. It's what we ascribe the meaning to. And so I think if you find the endless possibilities of the universe to be exciting and meaningful and worthwhile to pursue, then that is the meaning that we pursue in the universe.
So changing gears a little bit, just a few things around like your career and enjoyment, and also the impact you want to have on your students. What would you say you enjoy most about your work, both as a professor but also working with NASA?
As a professor, I think my greatest joy is teaching introductory astronomy classes for students who very often are taking the class not because they necessarily love astronomy, but because they had to take a science course. And sometimes, not all the time, students find that they really love learning about the universe. And they also find that as scared as they were about math and mathematics and how frightened they were maybe by a bad experience they had in high school or before, that they have the ability to do math, and it's not frightening, and it's something that anyone can learn. When I see that excitement by students who were not previously expecting to really enjoy astronomy, I love that. I also really enjoy mentoring graduate students, so students who have, like I was, in my youth when they commit to several years of spending the time, typically in their early 20s, learning deeply about a subject and becoming experts and professionals in that area. And you can see them grow over time. You can see them come in and be unsure about how to ask very basic questions about the subject, and then by the end of their graduate career, they are out there giving professional talks to other senior scientists, telling them about the research that they're doing and about the work that they do. And I think that's really wonderful.
Love that. In terms of developments in technology, your research and the work you've done with exoplanets, does technological advancement make your job easier as a scientist?
It makes it. Technological advancement is absolutely necessary for my job as a scientist. So I myself am not much of a technologist. I built some instruments when I was younger, but I haven't done that for many years, and I'm much more a scientist than an engineer or a technologist. I have enormous admiration for the people who work with equipment and work in laboratories and devising new and innovative ways of studying the universe and probing it and measuring it, and that is absolutely essential. So all of the work that I do as a scientist fundamentally relies on the work by the people who design and invent and build the instruments that we can actually use to observe the universe.
I don't know if this is sort of relevant, but sort of building on this question, is there any future developments that you're excited about that will allow you to unlock some kind of like knowledge or something? So I mentioned the Habitable Worlds Observatory. So that is a mission that, among many other things that it needs to be an incredibly stable telescope. It means that the whole telescope, which is going to be something like 30 feet across, has to be steady when it's sitting in space to a precision of picometer stability. That means less than the width of an atom. So it means the whole thing has to be completely steady, not flexing or vibrating or changing. And there's people right now who are working really hard on that. Similarly, the contrast, the blocking out the light of the star, a planet like the Earth is about 10 billion times fainter than our sun that we orbit. So in order to see a planet next to a star, you're having to block out a huge amount of light from the star to see the light of the planet. And there's dozens or hundreds of people working on inventing the technology for that. But what I'm also exceptionally excited about is, I mentioned the telescope that we're building. It's going out to where the James Webb Space Telescope is. It's a point called L2, the Lagrange point 2, which is a point out much further away than the moon that basically orbits along with the Earth as we orbit the sun. It's a kind of a place where the gravity is about equal. And when we send telescopes there, we have no expectation that we will ever send human beings out there. But we could send robots out there. And if we send robots out there, it means that if we build a telescope and it sits there for 10 or 15 years working, maybe we want to refresh the telescope. Maybe we want to refuel it or bring it new instruments or fix any broken pieces. And there are people who are working in robotic servicing, that is, devising robots that will go out to places on their own to fix telescopes. And I think that's just incredible. That's wild. Absolutely wild. What would you say is the best advice you've ever received in your career or life, and how that's impacted you?
Probably to calm down. I like bringing enthusiasm to all the interactions that I have, whether it's teaching or working in research or talking with colleagues. But I know that also I'm a larger person, and if you're a big guy who comes in with a lot of energy and enthusiasm, that can sometimes be off-putting to other people who are expecting more of a quieter or more relaxed or more careful discussion. And so the advice that I got from one of my mentors in certain interactions to calm down, leave space for other people to talk, don't take up so much sort of psychic space in the room that you're in. That was very, very good advice. And I try to follow it. I don't always succeed, but I try a lot.
Situational dependent, obviously. Mm-hmm. Why is it important for people to pay attention to this?
So when we pursue science in our society, oftentimes we're doing it in order to make discoveries that are going to make concrete differences in people's lives, cures for diseases, devices that will help us travel faster or better, to reduce harm to the environment, so many different things. But part of science is just doing the discovery of knowledge for its own sake. And when we make discoveries with instruments like the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope, those are discoveries that are not going to make anyone's life on Earth here better in a concrete material way anytime soon, if ever. Even so, it's worth pursuing it, because something that ennobles us as humanity is the discovery of new things in the universe. And NASA and the U.S. government are a little piece of doing that. And I think it's important for all astronomers, all scientists to speak up, to justify that it is worth our society spending just a little bit of money and resources trying to understand the universe, because this helps bring meaning to our lives. But that not everyone agrees with it, and that's okay. But even if nothing that we ever discover in space ever directly impacts the material life that we have here on Earth, I think it's still worthwhile, and I will always make the case that is the case.
I listened to this podcast, and I sort of just want to say that, so I've worked in technology my whole life, and so there's obviously the technology portion and taking things to market, the commercialization of science, and then there's like the scientists that are just like coming up with the discoveries. And so because of my old role building communities for entrepreneurship communities in New Zealand, we did get a lot of commercialized science. And so when I sort of started investigating NASA and sort of looking at some of the work they were doing, going back to like Kennedy, I just think as president he had phenomenal vision for kicking off this whole project. Like, imagine just someone going like, we're going to go to the moon, it's going to cost us a bloody fortune, but we're going to gear an entire nation around this mission of science. I just think that's absolutely wild, but like sort of laid one of the platforms for sort of some of the greatest discoveries of mankind, right?
I would argue, yeah, absolutely. Life in the world are complicated. There's a lot of competing priorities. There's, different things that we need to spend our time and energy and money on. But science is one of those things that has long-term benefits that you simply cannot see when you first start doing the research. One of the things that's, one of the things that I like about the career that I've chosen is that I've spent it within large institutions that have been around for a while. And that's fundamentally very different from working in a startup culture or a business where what you're concerned about is next week or next month. But I work in organizations that might have plans for 10 years, 20 years. What are we going to be in 100 years? And I like working in organizations of people that think in terms of that, whether it's a federal agency or a university, because it forces you to take a long view. Not that you don't pay attention to the short term also, and you need to, but having a little bit of time set aside for thinking about what's going to happen in the lives of people 50 or 100 years from now, and how can we be effective and helpful for that. I like that. That excites me.
In one of our early episodes of the Bountifull Podcast with Julie Fry, she's an economist and author, and we're sort of talking about consequence and like the unintended consequence of policy decisions on people and their daily lives. And sort of one of the gripes I have with the New Zealand political system, not that we're going to get into politics, is that we have 3-year terms.
For prime ministers and for members of parliament?
And I just don't think 3 years is enough to get anything done. And so in some ways, if you look at like countries around the world that sort of thrive, it's because they have longer term time horizons. And so I actually think those time horizons where you do have to worry about the consequence, 10 years, 20 years, an entire generation, I actually think that's almost a better way of thinking. It
is hard because you want to have near-term or short-term ability to pivot to new circumstances or new situations and to change policies or budgets or leaders in that time, but you also want to have the long-term. I think every institution struggles with that. And every institution or organization or community has their own ways of trying to handle that. And as we see, some work better than others and at different timescales.
So last question before we go to the quickfire round, our place in the universe.
Yes.
What is your thoughts?
I think our place in the universe is that we are so incredibly lucky to be, for those of us right now who are living at this time in humanity when billions of people have been lifted out of poverty just in the last 30, 50 years due to a whole series of technological and economic and political events. The fact that we live in lives of relative safety and relative comfort compared to how the vast majority of humanity lived for thousands and thousands of years, and that we can actually look to a possibility of progress and further increases in safety and comfort and health. Hope we realize it's not evenly distributed. Part of our role, I think, needs to be to figure out ways to make the benefits of human ingenuity more broadly available and for everyone out there. But we live at a pretty remarkable time, and I think there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of difficulty, but it doesn't mean that we can't look towards the possibility of a good future for us and for future generations.
Talking to you gives me hope for life, I think, because when I think about space and everything like Earth and discovery, that's just like kind of hope in a nutshell, isn't it?
It would be meaningless for us to pursue this knowledge if there wasn't at least a possibility that humanity would continue, that knowledge would be preserved, and that we would be able to pass this knowledge down to future generations to make their own discoveries. Otherwise, it would be, I think, fairly pointless, and I'm confident that it is not pointless.
Quickfire round.
Yes.
These are going to seem very random, which is fantastic. What, in your opinion, is the most underrated fruit or vegetable?
In my opinion, broccoli. When I discovered the ability to roast broccoli, to make just broccoli with a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper, it changed my relationship to vegetables.
Okay, I want to change it further. I don't know if you're into Asian fusion or those sorts of flavors, but in a frying pan, put a little bit of sesame oil, cook the broccoli so it browns a little bit, then add like 2 tablespoons of water and a tablespoon of soy sauce and sesame seeds. Okay. You get crispy, flavorsome.
In the pan?
In the pan.
I am going to do that tonight.
It is. I don't necessarily like the brassica taste of it sometimes, but that just is my favorite way to have broccoli.
Awesome.
I don't know if you drink, but if you do, what's your favorite cocktail?
My favorite cocktail, and I will absolutely, I believe this forever, it is the simplest one in the world. It is a gin and tonic with a twist of lime, sitting outside, looking in the backyard while the sun sets.
Love that. Worst meal that your parents made you eat?
That was so when I was young, I did not like fish. I love it now, but I didn't like it then. And my parents served me perch, which they didn't realize had gone bad.
Oh no.
And they thought I was just complaining that I didn't like fish, but it turned out I was complaining that the fish was actually bad.
We had another guest that happened to, and she, to this day, cannot. I'm talking about you, Lynn. I'm talking about you. She's an artist. She listens to these. She'll be like, hey, what word describes your life?
Curious.
Why?
Because I've never stopped wanting to learn. Probably one of my biggest regrets of the last 10 years of my life is I've been at a university with amazing classes about so many things, but I've been so busy with all the work that I do that I haven't been able to just stop in and take classes here at this university in all these amazing other topics in history and art and science and in every human area that I'd love to learn more about.
You know what they say, life's too short to have regrets.
It is. I should take some more classes.
You should. Sorry, this is a tangent, but also it's a pun. One of my speakers from yesterday, lovely man, David Spinks, we were talking about community belonging and sabbaticals, and he is adopting the theme of introducing more spaciousness which I appreciate is a bit punny in this situation.
Sure.
But kind of the concept is like we as humans cram things into our days.
Mm-hmm.
Our natural inclination is to add more rather than subtract. And so he is like, I'm creating space in my life to do the 3 things in my day really well, rather than to have a to-do list a mile long. Mm-hmm. And so my gift to you, which is a gift from him actually, is maybe the concept of adding more space. You're a very busy man, but you'll think about that.
I will think about that. I think we all have a little bit of a kind of a ping pong, relationship to time in schedules, especially for those of us who are very busy like we are, and it can be hard to carve out the time for the things that we need, or even for just the space, as you said. Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of the students that I've helped, the grad students that I've led to help them get their PhDs.
Do you have any tenets that you live by?
A number, I guess. I try to be as kind as I can to all the people that I see. I try to be generous in my expectations of people. I try to give both myself and other people the benefit of the doubt when I've got sort of creeping suspicions. Oh, someone's doing something because they are, whatever, they're mean or lazy or ignorant or whatever, and I'm realizing that that's usually not the right answer, and that if I give them the benefit of the doubt, they'll usually come through.
Love that. What is one thing that has really mattered in life that you maybe didn't realize mattered as much?
Running, for me. Running, the ability, when I'm not injured, the ability to just be, or whatever aerobic activity that people enjoy, but just that level of physical activity is just so clearing of the mind that I did not realize that before I started doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the inverse, something that you thought really mattered but have realized that it doesn't at all.
I don't know if I would say it doesn't matter, but of course in academia we tend to be very obsessed with titles and reputation and big names. And the older I get, the more I realize that the importance of sort of a brand name like a top university or a famous person, someone who's got a major award like a Nobel Prize, doesn't necessarily mean that the person or institution with that title is necessarily that much better or more capable. It often is a combination of as I said,
randomness.
Of randomness. Now, of course, no one ends up, like no institution or person ends up at the top of a ranking of whatever the thing is, purely by luck. But to appreciate and honor the degree of luck that's involved, I think makes us all a little bit more patient with each other.
How has your work in science influenced your understanding of happiness and contentment?
I think it's made me realize that there's many more paths to happiness and contentment than I'd previously understood. Sometimes I would find myself, especially when I was in graduate school, writing computer code. This is like a common thing that we all do as scientists. We're analyzing data, we're writing code. And I found myself sort of in the zone where I was just completely, utterly focused on that to the exclusion of everything else in my life. And I had been doing it for maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I realized it was almost leading to a degree of meditative contentment that I would not have expected as part of just writing computer code to analyze data. It revealed to me that there's a lot of different ways that we can find peace or serenity in life without going to an ashram and meditating for a while, or having a certain kind of family, or whatever the situation is. There's a lot of different ways of finding that.
Love that. Thank you, Joshua, for sharing your insights and experience with the Bountifull Podcast. For all of you listening at home or wherever you are, we'll include all of your incredible work in the show notes. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and subscribe and follow along. Our season is brimming with extraordinary guests from diverse backgrounds and hopefully having delightful chats that inspire you to explore what it means to you to live a bountiful life. So thank you, Joshua.
Thank you very much.
Bye.